Hey, everybody have a good connection, I hope. Let some more people join. Hello, Patty. Yep, much better. Good, that's good to hear. Okay, for new people, my name is Megan, also known as MistressXmas. I have been, oh, please take care of that, Patty. I have been in the BDSM community for over 25 years, and today we have Jay Wiseman with us. He's an author, a lawyer, a man of many trades, and is the author of SM101. Where's the book? Let's hold up the book. Let's do some free advertising while people are coming in.
Here.
All right, so this is the book. Hopefully everybody can see this. Okay, it's an introduction to, a realistic introduction, sorry. And the other book is Jay Wiseman's Erotic Bondage Handbook. Hopefully everybody can see that. And these are both excellent books. You can get these probably on Amazon or a number of other places. I would suggest Googling to find them. And so today we're going to talk about breath play, the good, the bad, and everything in between. Though to be perfectly honest, I'm not so sure there's a whole lot of good here. So I'm going to let Jay take over here. If you can describe for the viewers, and if you have questions, I am watching here, so hopefully I'll try to catch them and interrupt Jay, and so that you can get your questions in. But if you can, tell people what breath play is all about and how you do it and all that stuff.
Well, breath play or breath control play, as it's sometimes called, can be defined as suffocating or strangling your partner in an erotic context.
Oh, good fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you want to, well, how do they normally do it? Is it literally just strangulation, or is it like bagging a person, or how do they typically perform this function?
There's a multiplicity of techniques. It can be done by manual strangulation with the hands, or doing an armbar choke from behind. There are people who do ligature strangulation. They wrap a cord of some type around their partner's neck. There are actually people who even do noose play and actually sometimes lift their partner off the ground, which
so
obviously...
hanging.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And then there's various types of suffocation techniques, simply putting your hand over your partner's mouth and nose, or using a plastic bag, things like that.
Okay. So maybe you could give us a little bit about like your background and how you really know why you're an expert in this subject.
Well, I'm an expert witness, and a bit of a reluctant expert witness, actually. But,
yes.
Well, I was an ambulance crewman for a very long time, or for about 8 years, actually. And during that time, I took care of hundreds of patients who, for one reason or another, were low on oxygen. I've been teaching first aid and CPR classes since the early 70s. In the mid-80s, I became an instructor in the American Heart Association Advanced Cardiac Life Support class, which is basically a 2-day mini paramedic program where all the advanced life-saving, or many of the advanced life-saving interventions, such as airway management, defibrillating the heart, oxygen therapy, giving various drugs, that's gone over.
Right.
My undergraduate degree is in biology with an emphasis in physiology. I attended medical school for a couple of years. I went to one of the schools in the Caribbean, like the one on Grenada. Unfortunately, I did not have the money to finish,
right.
So there's that. But basically, I have a pretty good grounding in the anatomy, physiology, and pathology and pathophysiology of what's involved with these practices.
Right. Okay, so tell us a little bit about what's good or bad.
Well, let me give a bit of context.
Good. Context is good.
Sure. Yes, as you pointed out, I wrote this book. I wrote SM101, A Realistic Introduction.
Yes.
I believe that is the #1 best-selling BDSM educational book in the world. It's sold in the 6 figures. It's internationally distributed. It's been translated into other languages.
Uh-huh.
And I've been a very active educator and activist regarding BDSM play for more than 25 years now. I've actually been in the scene about 40 years.
Right, way longer than me.
And if you look at my overall track record as an educator and advocate, like bondage, yay, rah, go do it. I mean, I've written 2 books and produced 4 instructional DVDs on bondage.
Right.
Most of the classes I teach are bondage techniques. Spanking is great. Flogging is excellent. Clamps are really good things. Dominant, submissive interactions, those are all great. Breath play, oh, wait a minute. So I think the question becomes, as a guy who has actively advocated for and encouraged people to do A and to do B and to do C and to do E and F, then we get to G and wait a minute. Let's pause here. And so what is it that I regard as problematic about this particular practice when I don't see the others as being particularly problematic when done under reasonable circumstances?
Sure.
And to me, it's, well, if I had to put it in one sentence, I've treated hundreds of patients who were having heart attacks. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a saying. There's just no telling what a heart that is low on oxygen is going to do.
That it would be true.
Yes, it's very unpredictable. Some people can have very low oxygen levels for quite some time and recover, and they seem to be perfectly fine.
Yes.
Other people, if you give them the same, what's called in medicine, hypoxic insult, they're never the same afterwards. Their brain is damaged, or possibly their heart stops, and they go into cardiac arrest. And cardiac arrest outside the hospital is a disaster.
Yeah.
Most people who suffer a pre-hospital cardiac arrest don't survive that incident. And basically, breath play, any form of breath play, has the potential to suddenly and unexpectedly cause a cardiac arrest with no prior warning signs.
Right. So there is no sort of stopping at a safe point.
Correct.
Or
Correct.
at least it's almost impossible to define when the correct point is.
As we say on the witness stand, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, yes, that's true. There are instances sometimes where only a few seconds of suffocation or strangulation has caused a cardiac arrest.
Right.
Now, this is why a lot of play parties don't allow the practice. How is a dungeon monitor supposed to assess a scene like that? It could go disastrously wrong before anybody could do anything about it. Whereas
Exactly.
if you have a spanking or a whipping or something like that that's going on and the dom goes completely crazoid, that can be intervened in and still affect the outcome.
Sure. Sure.
So it's basically a Russian roulette type of risk model. You know, in Russian roulette, the gun either goes off or it doesn't go off. And if it doesn't go off, there's no problem. If it does go off, you've got a huge problem.
Yes, exactly. And in the cases where, for example, where you are an expert witness and this kind of thing has occurred, or at least a death has occurred, trying to prove that it was somebody just playing and not murdering is a difficult thing to probably prove.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. I think one of the things we can lose track of if we hang out in the S&M world too much is how inconceivable a lot of this is to a very, very large number of people.
Right.
I mean, I say, like, you know, a jury of your peers is, 12 people chosen at random from the nearest Walgreens or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and to them, the idea of doing a lot of this stuff, the idea of tying up your partner or spanking them or whipping them is like, are you kidding me? And choking them or suffocating them while you're having sex with them is like, you have got to be kidding me.
Yeah, that's a very different thing.
Yes.
That's very different. I agree. So basically, I guess the bottom line is don't take the chance.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. And I'm kind of frustrated because it's widely perceived that I, in fact, have said that, when, in fact, no. When I wrote my original essay on it for the first edition of SM101 in 1992,
right,
I had some wordage to that effect in there. When I wrote the second edition in 1996, I took a different position. I think it's riskier than people believe it to be.
Okay.
It has a level of risk, a catastrophic risk, that spanking and flogging and clamps and most forms of bondage, piercing.
Yeah, it's really hard for most of it to go really wrong.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And this can go really wrong really fast.
Right.
And once it goes wrong, and as I said, a pre-hospital cardiac arrest is a disaster. There's only a small chance of survival. I mean, I've heard people say, well, if you're going to do breath play, you should know CPR. And I can't agree that that's a reasonable precaution to take in this.
Yeah.
And I've been a CPR instructor since the early 70s. I've taught probably hundreds of CPR classes. I've trained thousands of people in CPR.
Right.
And it's good, and people should know how to do it. And yes, it can shift the odds of survival. But to say that knowing CPR takes this from being a very risky practice to a not so risky practice, no, the evidence just isn't there.
Well, what if you have a defibrillator?
Well, again, that would help.
That would help.
That would help. That would absolutely help. And they're teaching defibrillation as a civilian level first aid skill these days, and I think that's great.
Yep. A lot of companies have them.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of their standard safety equipment.
They do, and if most cardiac arrests happened at companies, that would be a good thing. But most cardiac arrests happen at home.
Yes.
And it's still very much the exception rather than the rule,
right,
that we have defibrillators in private homes.
That is true.
But again, yes, if someone suffered a cardiac arrest and you had a defibrillator, then by all means, yes, you should use it. But again, the evidence just isn't there to say that, well, okay, I've got this, I know CPR and I've got this defibrillator, therefore now there's no inherent risk of death or great bodily injury if I choke my partner. I'm sorry, no, you just can't get to point B from that point A.
So basically, it's still don't do it.
I wish you would quit saying that. I really wish you would quit saying that. No, that's not my message. Please stop that, okay?
Okay, well then what is the message then? So you're saying do it, but be careful, or?
I suppose the message is look that risk right in the eye.
Right.
Don't deny it. Don't minimize it.
Right.
You know, I understand, like, if you're going to allow your partner to choke you, you know, I understand that I might be about, that I might be about to die from your doing this.
Right.
I understand that if I die from this, it'll be the end of my life, and all of my family and friends will be horribly traumatized from that.
And possibly your partner could spend a life in prison because it's considered murder rather than you were playing.
Well, murder is actually legal jargon with a specific definition. But for the person doing it, again, look the risk right in the eye.
Right.
You know, I understand that I could kill you by doing this to you. And if I do that, there's a very good chance that I will spend the rest of my life as a bankrupt prison inmate. And again, all my family and friends and everyone who cares about me is going to be horribly traumatized. And I will tell you, I've done expert witness work in 2 death penalty cases where breath play was at issue.
Right.
And the murder case I'm working in now may be filed as a death penalty case. We're still waiting to hear from the prosecutor on that.
Somebody just asked what happens to the person's body and mind while they're doing breath play.
Well, you would have to ask them, I suppose. It's not a particular interest of mine, let me say. I don't like it when it's done to me. I've tried it a few times.
Or physiologically, what's going on?
Well, I just want to say that, you know, I've tried it in both roles a bit. I don't enjoy it at all when it's done to me, and it scares me when I do it to other people. So,
right.
So I'm not a good person to ask what's rewarding about this, because I don't find any aspect of it rewarding.
Yeah, I would be scared as hell to attempt it, and I don't think I would allow anybody to do it on me.
Well, I think from the recipient's point of view, there's psychological rewards and there's physiological rewards. So the psychological sense of surrender or submission. I know one lady who told me, I really like passing out. You know, I know one submissive woman who was just in awe that, oh my God, me and my dominant might control the very air I breathe.
Yeah.
So that was rewarding to them from a psychological point of view. From a physiologic point of view, many people do enjoy the experience. For a lot of people, when they get low on oxygen, their first symptom is a sense of euphoria.
Right.
And there are some people who report that they believe they have more intense orgasms.
Yes.
If they're being strangled or suffocated during sex.
I've heard all these things as well.
Now, from the dominant's point of view, I think the rewards are primarily psychologically. I don't really grasp what the physiologic rewards would be from doing that, but psychologically, the idea of controlling your partner, controlling whether or not they breathe, controlling whether or not they're conscious,
right,
etc. I can understand that to some people that would be appealing.
Right. They're being denied oxygen and becoming lightheaded, increasing orgasm. That's what one person here is saying.
I'm not sure that's actually been quantitatively studied, but there are people who report that that's what it feels like, so we'll take them at their word.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, yeah, I still am not sure about whether or not how anybody can attempt this in a safe manner. I'm not sure that that's really possible.
Well, what definition of safety are you using?
Exactly. Well, and it's the same thing when I do fire play. because fire play is inherently just not safe. Something can go wrong anytime, no matter how many precautions you take. So it is a risk-reward situation.
I think so. I think the distinction between something like fire play and breath play is in fire play, we know we can take meaningful precautions to reduce the risk. I mean, my friend and fellow BDSM author, Bob Rebell, wrote a book on fire play, and I wrote the foreword to that book. And in looking over Bob's book, he clearly had layers within layers within layers of safety practices.
Yes.
So that the probability of something really catastrophic happening was reduced to a very, very low level.
Yes, exactly. Death is reduced to a pretty low level. Getting burned is possible, but once again, depends on your safety precautions. But it can always happen.
I think that's actually, well, I wrote an essay back in the 90s called I Want My Precaution Be, or Where's My Precaution Be?
Right.
And the point of the essay was that a lot of us have received our sex education in the time of AIDS. And therefore, we're sort of used to a syllogism model of sex education. And the syllogism is usually, practice A is very dangerous. Precaution B greatly mitigates the risk of practice A. Therefore, if you're going to engage in practice A, please take precaution B. And there's any number of examples of this, wear a condom being a very obvious one. And then we get to something like breath play, and basically there really isn't any meaningful precaution B.
Yes.
It's, as I said, look the risk right in the eye and take it or don't take it. But understand that you're facing an entirely quantitatively different level of risk here. If this goes wrong, you don't have a welt or a bruise or a burn or a laceration, you have a corpse.
Right. That is true. So then, from your expert witness experience, in the cases that you've done, I mean, what is really the percentage of people that end up getting convicted of some kind of murder kind of thing versus are not convicted because it was a play situation, it was a consensual thing?
Well, the fact that it's consensual doesn't mean what happened wasn't a crime.
True. That is true.
Okay.
Exactly.
In fact, there's a sort of a secondary point here. People who study domestic violence figured out that if someone has to endure an incident of domestic violence where they are suffocated or choked, they are 8 times more likely to subsequently be murdered by their abuser than somebody who hasn't had this happen. And as of today, as of when I'm speaking these words, something like 30 states, including California, where we are, have passed laws that make strangling or suffocating someone you're dating, someone you're living with, someone you've had a child with, someone you used to date, etc. That's now a felony per se, with no consent defense allowed. Presumably, all 50 states and other countries will have similar laws in the not too distant future.
So is the bottom line, if something does go bad, more than likely somebody's going to be doing some time?
Yes, I think that's fair to say. I've only heard, well, let me back up a bit. From a legal and forensic point of view, you can only die from one of 5 ways. You can only die from homicide, which is one human being killing another human being.
Right.
Suicide, accident, natural causes, or unclassified. And unclassified means you should be in one of the other 4 categories. We just don't have enough information to put you in here. So every case that I've heard of, except one, the defendant was convicted of one degree or another of criminal homicide. I have heard of one case that resulted in acquittal on an accidental death basis, but I haven't been able to track that down.
Here's a question for you. Is breath play defined only as choking or constriction?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't say so. As I said, breath play is basically choking or suffocating your partner.
It's asphyxiation in some form, right?
Well, not necessarily. Choking isn't necessarily. Asphyxiation is cutting off oxygen.
Right.
Choking doesn't necessarily cut off oxygen. I mean, if you choke them hard enough, you can collapse their windpipe.
But isn't that the whole point of breath play is too?
Well, let me finish what I was going to say here.
All right.
If you there's basically three things that happen, maybe four things that happen when you choke somebody. You can close off their windpipe, which takes a lot of pressure and is extremely uncomfortable for the recipient. You can pinch off the carotid arteries going into their brain and deprive their brain of oxygen.
Okay.
Or you can stimulate the carotid sinus bodies, which are down here at the base of the internal carotid artery. And those are basically barometers that measure blood pressure going into the head. And if they sense an increase in blood pressure, they trigger the brain to do two things. The first thing is to dilate the arteries in the brain, so the blood pressure in the brain goes down. And the second thing they do is they send a message to the heart via the vagus nerve to slow down the rate and force of cardiac contraction. Now, most of the time, maximum vagal stimulation of a heart reduces cardiac output by about 1/3. But every now and then, it flatlines the patient. And this is, of course, one of the major risks involved. You never really know when that's going to happen.
Here's somebody, I have a client who's into breath play. That's why they were asking about, oh boy, I missed the end of that. Could you ask it again, please? Sorry.
Sometimes it's prudent to tell clients no.
Yeah, I would imagine. Sarah, be careful. Yeah.
That's one of the things that bothers me about it. People say, well, I do breath play, but I'm really careful about it. And what exactly does careful look like?
I would agree.
I mean, when you drive a car, you're careful if you wear your seatbelt. You're careful if you have...
Use your blinkers and...
If you have a first aid kit in your car, stuff like that. Many times when people think they're being careful, what they are in fact doing is relying on raw, blind luck.
Yeah, I get your point.
Again, it's a Russian roulette risk model. It's a roll of the dice.
Yes.
Every single time.
Yeah. It does just sound so risky. I agree.
Well, this is it. It's, as I said, we've been taught practice A is dangerous. Precaution B makes it safer. Therefore, if you're going to engage in practice A, please take precaution B. And there really aren't any medically meaningful precaution Bs when it comes to breath play. There basically are no meaningful harm reduction measures.
Exactly, because it can always go wrong.
Yes, and there actually have been people who've managed to kill themselves from holding their own breath.
Oh, here we go. I'm into breath holding such as free diving, but not choking myself or someone else.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to hold your breath and possibly you may or may not pass out before you can get air.
Also, one of the other things that will trigger a vagal response is increased pressure inside the chest. There's actually a therapeutic maneuver that's done for some patients with certain types of abnormal heartbeat. It's called a Valsalva maneuver, V-A-L-S-A-L-V-A. And that's basically taking a deep breath and holding it and bearing down.
Right. So holding your breath till you pass out. still has risks.
Yes.
I mean, so people that think that, oh, I can just hold my breath till I pass out, I'm still fine because I'll start breathing again.
That's probably going to be what happens.
Right, but there is that risk that it could cause what you were saying before, a cardiac arrest or some other.
There's absolutely that risk.
Right. So if you do it, it's back to you just take the chance, and hopefully everything goes well. But
as I said,
don't guarantee.
It's medically unpredictable, and it's legally indefensible.
Right.
If you're going to do this, look those risks right in the eye.
Yep. Exactly. And it's for both people involved.
Yeah, I will tell you something. As someone who has done expert witness work in real-world murder prosecutions where this is an issue,
Right.
It's very, very sobering to sit in court, sit on the witness stand, and look out, and there are the people who've come to see the trial, and family and friends of both people
Right.
are typically there,
Yeah.
and they're just destroyed by
I was
this.
just going to say, it just destroys lives.
Yeah, I mean, any person's premature death is a tragedy.
Yes, it's going to affect friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, that happens. But
Yes.
okay, guys, do you have any questions here? I don't know. There was a couple I know I missed as they went by. I don't know if we have answered or if Jay has answered more specifically, because I'm not answering anything here. So I am only giving my opinion. No way I'm going to be found dead in a closet with a noose around my neck and my dick in my hand.
Mm.
Well, that's a good thing. That is a good thing. Did Jay enjoy it being done to him?
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, I cannot imagine allowing myself to lose that kind of control. And I actually really like being submissive and giving my control, but I don't know about it having it being taken, so to speak. I think that's a different issue that I'm not so sure is good for me.
No, that's a subjective issue. That's something that people could reasonably feel very differently about.
Oh, yeah.
One to another.
Well, there's a lot of people that actually do breath play and find it enjoyable, which is why this is a really good subject.
And we haven't even touched on the whole raft of secondary complications that could occur, such as rupture of the larynx or fracture of the hyoid bone, etc. They precipitate a stroke, it can cause blindness, etc. I've been asked how common is it in the SM community. Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. In a death penalty case I did some years ago, I went to a FetLife group that had nothing whatsoever to do with breath play.
Right.
And I analyzed something like 1,400 profiles to see if they expressed an interest in doing it or having it done to them. Because the prosecution, the defense was arguing that the dead woman was a sex worker. And the defense was arguing that she had asked her boyfriend to do this to her when the two of them had sex, to distinguish it from what she did with her clients. And the prosecution response was, don't be ridiculous, nobody has to be choked during sex. And what I found in doing that review of the FetLife profiles was that 3% of them were from women who had an interest, who expressed an interest in having this done to them. So we were able to argue to the court that, in fact, you know what, a non-zero number of people do like this.
Yeah, and from my experience of the people I know that have tried and do breath play, actually none of them are in the BDSM community.
Right.
So this is common outside of it, and I think it's just, at least for the people I know of, thought as a way to increase sexual pleasure, stimulation, orgasm.
There was couple of things there. There was a very horrific incident that occurred in the Philadelphia BDSM community about 6 to 7 years ago.
Definitely, Patty.
Basically, a man committed suicide by hanging himself from a bridge. And when the officers responded to his home, they found his dead girlfriend in the house. I think with the sash cord from a bathrobe around her neck. Apparently he had killed her and then stayed in the house with her body for several days before finally committing suicide.
Oh, wow.
And a few days before this happened, several people in the Philadelphia scene told me that she had posted, "My top and I are doing breath play to spice up our scenes, but don't worry, we know what we're doing."
Yeah.
And now we have a homicide-suicide out of that.
Right, proving that they didn't know what they were doing.
But a lot of people do this who aren't necessarily in the BDSM community.
Yeah, well, none of the people I know are in the do BDSM at all.
Like this case, I'm currently a defense expert in a murder case here in California, and I've spent a substantial amount of the last several weeks preparing a report. And among other things, I found lots of things online, like images that say, "Life is too short to pretend that you don't like being choked during sex." And we found videos about it on YouTube and other places, articles in newspapers about it, even Playboy and Cosmopolitan have written on the topic.
Sure, well, and that's the best part about the internet. You can find a pile of everything you're looking for. And it may or may not be related to any particular subject.
It's funny because while my own stance on breath play is highly cautionary, when I testify, and otherwise, you might almost confuse me with a breath play advocate, because we're trying to establish that, no, actually, it is plausible to believe that people were actually doing this as part of consensual sex.
Right.
I mean, one of the things we might point out is, for example, a lot of people engage, well, some undetermined percentage of people engage in autoerotic asphyxiation, which is doing it to yourself.
Exactly.
And the American Psychiatric Association estimates 1 death per million people per year. So if there's about 7 million people here in the Bay Area, we're going to have 7 deaths per year.
Yeah.
Now, law enforcement estimates go considerably higher than that. They go up to like 4 times as high. So if the population of the United States is, say, 300 million people, we're going to have somewhere between 300 to 1,200 deaths just from autoerotic asphyxiation per year. But again, these are not mandated reporting deaths. So trying to research how often they actually occur is very problematic. Similarly, kids around 10 to 14, many of them nowadays are, well, this has actually been going on for a long time, but many of them for a while experiment with what's called the choking game, which is making themselves pass out for one way or another. Among other things, it's a way of getting a brief high without using drugs.
Right.
And so this is believed to be an appeal.
Yeah. Yep, it is an interesting subject, and something I will never try because of just the fear of taking that chance. but lots of people do. So,
and people vary in their susceptibility to it. The first time I testified, I think I identified 9 risk factors
right.
that would put a person at increased risk of suffering a cardiac arrest from breath play. Like age is one. A relatively young person, well, let's say a very healthy 20-year-old has one level of risk, and a not so healthy 70-year-old
yes, exactly.
has another level of risk. Well, we can't quantify those risks. And also, we don't know what the shape of the curve between those 2 dots looks like.
Exactly. Yeah.
But being over 40, being on tricyclic antidepressants, obesity, cocaine use, methadone use, pregnancy. There are a few others. In fact, there's some reason to believe that some people are just genetically more susceptible than others, which would explain the variety of response to a hypoxic insult, as I talked about earlier. Some people can just deal with this better than other people.
That would make sense. So I guess summarizing, you want to summarize this little subject here, if even possible?
Well, it's always medically unpredictable. As I said, you just can't tell what a heart that's low on oxygen is going to do.
Right.
Or in some cases, a heart that has plenty of oxygen but is susceptible to strong stimulation by the vagus nerve. Oh, sudden severe fear is another risk factor, as is sudden exposure to severe heat or cold. Pressure on the eyeballs can do it.
So I would assume anxiety has some effect as well.
Well, I'm not going to say that taking a Xanax is a reasonable harm reduction measure, but basically it's...
No, I wasn't thinking that.
But it's always medically unpredictable.
Right.
Okay. And it can go great 1,000 times, and the 1,001st time you can do the same thing, and this time you can have a bad outcome. You're always rolling the dice.
Exactly.
It's legally indefensible. If you kill or severely damage your partner with this, you really have consent is not really a defense. Assumption of risk is not really a defense. Basically, you're looking right down the barrel of a criminal prosecution and possibly a civil lawsuit from this.
Exactly.
And one thing to keep in mind about a civil lawsuit is there's no right to an attorney if you are sued. And in something like this, you could get a punitive damage award, and punitive damages cannot be erased in bankruptcy.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So it's like, are you a homeowner?
Yep.
Do you have a stock portfolio?
Exactly. They can take your life away from you.
They absolutely can.
Yeah.
They absolutely can.
Okay. All right, people. I guess we should probably end this. We've been going for about 50 minutes now. If you have any last minute questions, that would be great. There is one other little thing I wanted to mention, and 1 second real quick while I grab it because I don't remember. And
I'll try and entertain them while you've gone away.
Exactly. Well, one of our friends, Mojo, is doing a 5K run for RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. So here is oh boy, I hope this focuses. Let's see if you can read this. There we go, perfect. So please go to this URL and donate money. That would be really, really nice. This is a great cause, or if you want to join the team, you can go join the team. Either way, it would be great for you to invest a little money in helping people that really need it. All right, great. So that's all I have. And hopefully this was useful information to some people. and I will see you all next week. Oh, someone offered me $40,000 to, yeah, okay. That's useful. All right, well, all right, guys, thank you. And we will talk to you later.